Welcome. Hey, everybody who's joining, welcome. We'll get started in just a few. Hi, Ann. What's going on, girl? Hi, my name is Erica Stankwytch Bailey. Let's see. Let me show you my face while I'm talking. Let's see. Hi, my name is Erica Stankwytch Bailey, and I'm really excited to welcome you to the 47th episode of Working Knowledge. Working Knowledge is an interview show amongst folks who happen to be makers, creatives, artists, people that I consider to be visionaries. I really love people's stories, the stories that form, what they choose to do, why they choose to do it, what they make, how they do it. So I thought it would be fun and informative and interesting to spend some time asking these brilliant people some simple questions, listening, hearing their stories, and learning a lot. Every episode, I definitely learn something new about some incredible person in this world. And oftentimes I'm also learning something new about myself. So that's really been interesting and exceptional. Because of this, I decided to share this as a live interview. So for anybody who joins us today live, welcome. And thank you so much for being here to spend some time with us and to listen to Ann and I chat. And for anybody who joins later, thank you too. I'm so glad if you're taking the time to listen to these interviews. I've got so much gratitude for the people who come on and spend their time and share their stories. And I also have a lot for those of you who decide to stick around and listen. So, and again, welcome and thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to my interview today. I'm going to talk to Ann Chikahisa of Chikahisa Studios. She's out of Seattle, Washington. She's a really talented metalsmith, a really wonderful human being, kind, warm, thoughtful. And I think she's just incredibly smart at what she does. And I feel really honored to have her as a friend. So I'm super excited to get to chat with her today and learn more about what she's been doing the last 18-ish months. So anyway, I saw her come in here. So let me find Ann and invite her. All right. So, you guys know, if you watch, that I love to give origin story, how I met somebody, where... Hey, what's happening, friend? I'm good. What's going on? You doing all right?
I'm doing okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Am I coming through to you all right?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. Good. I was just going to share our origin story, so I'm kind of glad you popped up because I was saying, for folks that listen, know that I always give origin story with people. And I think for most folks who listen, they also know that I check in with the person that I'm interviewing the day before. And when we chatted yesterday about origin story, it was real awesome for me because I felt like what you were saying was just straight out of my heart. So anyway, the way that you and I met was that for many years, I went to Philadelphia and Baltimore to do wholesale shows in February, right? And over the years, I found and had and leaned heavily on this really tight group of friends that we called Hammer Time because we were all jewelers and maybe we were getting hammered every once in a while. Anyway, we called ourselves Hammer Time. And when one year, I think around 2012, I didn't go because I was, in February, I was like 8 months pregnant with my daughter, my last child. Well, anyway, so everybody else goes to Philly that year, Philly and Baltimore. And all I hear about from anybody when they come back is this wonderful woman named Ann that they met. That was like so much fun and so warm and so amazing. And so fast forward a year later, I'm like waiting to get to meet you, and you lived up to every bit of the stories and the warmth and the things that they, you know, that they had told me about you. But when we talked yesterday, you know, you talked a lot about the supportive community that we're a part of.
Yeah.
And the sharing.
Yes.
And I just wonder if you would, if you can even remember what you said yesterday, if you would share a little bit about what you said to me yesterday about our community. And
yeah. And but first I want to go back to our origin story because it's so funny. Because this group of people, there's men and women that you're talking about, Erica. They approached me because I had met them all the year before in Philly, and we became friends. And then the following year, I said to them, "Oh, the following year, I want to be by you guys because you guys always had the same area."
Such a good time, yeah.
For a booth. And I remember they said, "No, you can't be next, far away from us. You have to be with us because Erica's not coming back next year. We need another wingman." So I'm like, "Well, who's Erica?" And they're like, "Oh, she's so awesome, and you have very big shoes to fill because she's so amazing." And I was like, "Oh my God!" So I got to hang out with your whole group and got to know them really well, and it was so fabulous. And then the following year, when you did come back and we actually got to meet, it was so fun to see you and meet you and connect with you because I had heard all these great stories, and everything lived up to what everyone said about you. And I'm so glad that we've become friends over the years and been at shows and everything. And that's what led to us talking about the community, because that's what this is all about. We all bond together when we do these shows. We spend so much time together over a weekend.
Yeah.
And you just share knowledge, you share friendships, you share all the ups and downs. What we were talking about is when you're having a really shitty show, you all just commiserate. But it's so nice to have that community that you can talk to them about it, and everyone understands what you're going through. And it's not a pity party, but it's just saying, yes, this is part of an artist's life. It's it's not all glamour and it's not all easy. There's a lot of self-doubt and there's a lot of questions. Am I doing the right thing? How do I do this?
How do I do it?
And am I crazy? Is this idea or this piece of jewelry I made, is it so out of the realm? Or, all those questions that we have as makers. And that's what makes it so fun when you have this supportive group. So I just feel so fortunate that you guys allowed me to be part of it.
Oh my gosh, of course.
It was so fun.
Well, and they're such a oh my gosh. So that's Jason Jano, who's a jeweler, Tavia Brown. It would have been Laura Cardwell, Molly Dingledine, right?
And Lee was there.
And Lee, yes. Oh my gosh. And yeah, it's all these amazing metalsmiths who were all trying to figure this world out,
Right. And everybody has a different aesthetic, which made it so much more fun because, we could trade notes of how things were done, trade notes about how we price things. And also, which was really, really helpful too, is just sharing our experiences with different stores and how we approach them, right?
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And then introducing different stores to each other was really helpful too.
I'll never forget, and this I'm kind of getting out of sync, or out of who we're talking about. But Philly one year, there's a really talented jeweler named Lisa Crowder out of Austin, Texas, and she comes over and she says, "Hey, listen, I think you'll see a buyer today. I think he'd like your work. I sent him over to you." And I was like, "Oh, fantastic, great! It was wonderful." And that was probably 10 years ago. And this guy ended up being one of my best accounts, hands down, and still buys, And that all happened because another maker was like, yeah, you know what? Erica would be a good fit for this gallery. And those kind of connections are so important
Well, and having another jeweler introduce you to a store is invaluable, because if you've got a strong relationship with that buyer and you understand their store, of course you can help make that introduction, which is 80% of getting in the door, right?
Being seen, like, right. Getting the 30 seconds of being seen and getting to have the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is, and it's funny because it's like that part of my, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That part of my, we have this funny technology thing going on in my house where my husband's Bluetooth earphones are obsessed with connecting to my phone. So it's like, no matter what happens. So I just saw this little thing that said his earpods had connected, and I was like, oh my gosh. But it's funny because when I think about that time in my career, it both feels like yesterday and a billion years ago.
Right.
You know, because I think when we were doing those shows, at least for me, it was just kind of diving into the deep end and really figuring it out as I went, and talking to other people and meeting other artists, and every year learning something that seemed obvious, but it hadn't been, right? It's like you say something to me and I'm like, right, like that's how that's done, you know?
So
I remember, and I think we're getting in the weeds a little bit, so I'll try not to keep going this way, but I remember doing my first wholesale show, and I had read about terms that I didn't know what they meant, and I was just kind of going to fake the funk, you know? And luckily it was like some artist that I was talking to used one of those terms, and I was like, hey, I'm a little embarrassed, but can you tell me what that means? And she was like, oh yeah, totally, no, you know, and so kind about it. And like, yeah, no, I didn't know what it meant either. And so anyway.
I think we just assume that we should know all these things, and you don't. So, and we've all been there. We've all been in those situations. I remember my very first show, and I couldn't figure out how to hang my lights correctly, and I was across the hall from Thomas Mann, and he came over and climbed up on my table and hung them for me, and I was forever grateful. And he's like, we've all been there. We don't know how to do these things.
So I was doing it, one of my first ever shows. Same thing. I was putting my lights up, and I was using track lights, and I put my track up, and everything had been working. Like I was putting the lights in the track, right? And then all of a sudden I get to like the fifth light in this track, and it works, but it turns every other light off. And I'm like, what is going on? What's happening? And I'm trying to figure it out, and I can't figure it out. And same thing, I go to this guy across the hall who I think I had met one time before. He ended up becoming a dear friend, Brian Bortz. He's a woodworker. And I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. I know you're setting up, but I'm flummoxed. Can you please help me figure this out? And he comes up, and he's up there, and he's trying to figure it out. And he finally turns around, and he said, I don't know how you did it, but you got this light in the track backwards working, but it like and just, you know, and you're like, how in the hell did I even accomplish this, you know? Like, how, I mean, when you look back, you're like, I survived that despite myself, right?
So true. It's so true.
Yeah.
I think that's what I love the most about doing these shows is the community that we all, I mean, whether you're a jeweler or woodworker or ceramicist or whatnot, it's because we're all experiencing this event together. You really create and develop strong bonds. So every time you're at a show, you hang out with that person. I mean, because basically you're spending 3 days across the hall from somebody or next to somebody. And
yes.
You become best friends with that person.
You do. And you learn about I mean, it's kind of amazing how much you can learn about somebody in 3 days if you're standing beside them for the duration of those 3 days. And before we get too far, what I want you to do is introduce yourself to us first. Tell us, tell me and the audience a little bit more about you and your work, and just really anything that you want to share. But before you and I do what I know we're going to do, which is just have a great conversation, I'd love for everybody who listens to know a little bit more about you first.
Sure. So my name is Ann Chikahisa, and I'm a jeweler, and I just started my career. It's my second career. I was in the corporate world before, and so what I did was I took a class at a local jewelry studio, art studio, and just fell in love with the process. You ask any jeweler, and it's the same thing. It's very addictive. And I think I'm a pyromaniac at heart, and that's why I love soldering.
Absolutely.
And it just took off from there. And the part of jewelry making that I loved the most was working with wax. So I do a lot of wax casting. And my work is all about organic shapes and textures. And my newest collection that I've been working on in the last year and a half, 2 years, is my talisman collection, which is probably my most personal collection. It's all about helping women, or anyone really, not really specifically women, but helping the person feel empowered through expressing themselves through jewelry. So a talisman, each one has special meaning, and you can collect them and put them together. So
that's amazing.
That's kind of what I'm all about.
Do you happen to have any jewelry at hand that you could share with us?
Absolutely.
Please
do. So, so here's a few pieces of the talisman collection. So I have these little connectors. They swivel, and they're oxidized. So these connectors are really meant to hold all your talisman. So this is what they look like. So this is compassion. It's a key, and it's wrapped in 18 karat gold. So you can, and there's a jump ring on it, so you can just attach it to this.
That's cool.
So I have all different ones. This one is healing. This one was inspired by the sun. It's very organic in shape. And to me, healing was all about feeling that sun on your skin. It's very rejuvenating. So that's what inspired this. And I created this during the beginning of COVID to help people feel like they were a little bit in control of their life. And
yes, is what was happening.
Yeah, and a lot of people did buy this as gifts and sent it to healthcare workers or somebody who was in the healing field. And then I have another one. This is a little cup with a little bit of gold on it. And it's called Truth. And I did that, put the gold in there to resemble, or to show that there's a kernel of truth that you're holding with you, so that you can continue to seek truth in your life. And two of my favorite are the strength ones. This one has a chain with a black diamond on it, and it's got 18 karat gold in it across the top, and then a little bit of gold holding the diamond bead. It's really kind of like a shield, a warrior shield to help protect. And this is the other strength one that I have. It's all sterling silver with a little bit of gold, and the diamond is set in 18 karat gold.
Wow.
So they're all signed, and when I initially launch them, I'll number them. So usually it's 1 to 25 or 1 to 50, and then after that they're just signed and they're not numbered. This is Wisdom, and it has a freshwater pearl on it. So I put holes in that, and it kind of it shows like it's a sifter. So you're sifting through all the muck and finding your wisdom.
Holding the thing.
This is Reflection, and this one was inspired by a vintage mirror. And so it's got a little diamond on it.
Okay. And so the great part is that, I mean, I know you said this, I'm reiterating it probably for me more than anybody else, but you can kind of create your own little collection, right? And you can just add, that's lovely.
Like this is a necklace that I'm shipping out to a customer. And so she has Compassion, Harumi, which is spring, and Strength on it. So that was her personal one. So you can buy them individually and then just put it on a connector. I also have another connector, which is like a paper clip.
Oh, that's cool.
Instead of doing the lock connector. And then I also do the lock with a little diamond on it. It's got a diamond on both sides.
Wow, that's a cool thing.
Isn't it?
That swivel, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then this is Balance. So it's got a sapphire in it. So each one's a little different, and they look beautiful together. Like, I'll show you how you can just...
And is that your bronze? Because you use like your bronze is a really beautiful color. Was the balance?
The balance is bronze.
Bronze.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I use a proprietary blend of bronze. It really mimics 18 karat gold.
Nice.
So yeah, I love it. It doesn't have that red tint that so often you see in bronze.
Yeah.
So this one is balance, compassion, and healing. So that's what that looks like.
That's amazing.
So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Oh yeah, well, and I love it because I think that one of the great joys for me of being a jewelry maker, a jewelry designer, is the intimacy inherent in what we make. That we make things that people choose to put on their bodies, sometimes every day.
Yeah.
And when I started seeing you putting out the Talisman series, I was like, gosh, it's so amazing because things can be so evocative, right? When something comes into your life at the right time, being somebody who's a collector of handmade things. I mean, I have things that I saw, walking through a craft show that stopped me in my tracks 15 years ago, and it's still evocative. I mean, I think that's what art is to us, right? And so anyway, this idea that you're giving people the opportunity to create these beautiful little curated, intimate talismans that they can wear and carry with them, I just think it's awesome. And the wonderful like tactile nature of your work and how it moves, and it's just so nice to see all those things together.
Yeah, when I started this collection, I just really wanted something that had meaning to me and was an art piece. And, there's so many talisman out there, that are very, exactly what it is when you look at it, right? So right. You see a heart for love, you see, I mean, not to put it down, it's just, it's that's the interpretation of it.
Because sometimes literal is really good too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But for me, I wanted something that was more artistic and more something meaningful to me and not so obvious to the audience.
To the audience. Yeah.
So what's really fun about wearing this is it's a great conversation piece. When I'm always wearing my talisman, and when I'm out walking around or at a store or whatnot, more people ask me, oh, that's really cool what you're wearing, what is it? So you can have really interesting conversations with people because of what you're wearing. So
absolutely. Oh, it does. I mean, I think, handmade jewelry in general is a wonderful way to kind of interact and engage with other people. But yes, especially if that what you have has a story. It's funny talking about talismans or kind of like literal imagery versus not. I had a conversation, one of my working knowledge interviews, with a really amazing human being, Laura Wood. And she talked about her obsession with art that involves body parts. Eyeballs or hands, or she gave a long list of things. And I don't know, sometimes I think life is funny and one little thing will plant a seed. And then all of a sudden I was noticing like all of these things with for me particularly hands and eyes. And I won't go into this deep story about this eyeball pendant I had once in my life. But anyway, I just slowly started to be obsessed with hand jewelry, which seems really literal, right? Like, I think it's because I work with my hands, I make jewelry. It is so like literally symbolic. But it's interesting because I ended up kind of obsessing like I do, like, and I found some jewelers who were making handwork, and I got, and it's funny because I don't have it on today, but I got a piece from a woman named Susan, I believe it's Fauman, Fauman. That's a hand holding a gemstone, which, anyway, and it's felt so powerful to me, this piece, putting it on my body every day. And so we definitely Yeah, there's a lot of power in the things that we choose to put on.
Yeah, and you know what? I had the biggest compliment the other day from a customer who bought a bunch of the talisman, and she had seen it online and picked it all out, and I sent it to her, and then she wrote me a message, and she said, "Oh my God, your jewelry is so powerful, and you don't feel it until you actually see it."
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest compliment ever to me, because that's what I hope that the talisman gives to the wearer, is this feeling of empowerment, because we all have that inside of us. We just need to be reminded that we have to trust ourselves and use our own intuition and be able to manifest the life we want. So that meant a lot to me.
To know the truth. I like that you said we have to remind ourselves. Not that we have to remember or realize, but remind us. Sorry, I have to take all my notes in the interview. Sorry. So just look it down. I'm just taking notes. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, if you don't mind, whether you want to talk about what your first career was or not, I will leave that to you. But I would love for you to expand a little bit more on that first jewelry class and then the growth or transition into becoming a professional. Because one of my questions that I always love to ask people is like, when did you know that this is what you were going to do professionally?
Oh, that's a great question. So to give you a little history, I was in the corporate world. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, and I was a salesperson. And I did that for many, many years. And I just became really disenfranchised because I was doing this job not because it fulfilled my soul. And I just felt really empty. So I started to make jewelry because as a child, I always did creative things, ceramics, painting. Not that I was any good at it, but I just loved to work with my hands. And I realized that later as an adult, that I like to do physical things and create. And tangible. I like to get my hands dirty. Yeah. So I just took this first class, and I think I became very obsessed. There was jewelry all over my house. I was always at the studio. My kids are like, "Where's mom?" "Oh, she's at the jewelry studio." When are we going to eat for dinner? Because I was never home. Or, they'd wake up and I wasn't home, and they'd be like, "Where's mom?" So it became an obsession. And where the turning point happened was I was giving jewelry to all my friends. I wasn't selling it after I started making it, but I just started giving all my friends jewelry. And my one friend said, let's for fun just have let's invite our friends over to my house, bring all the jewelry you've made, and we'll have a trunk show. I'm like, okay. And so I took it over there, and I spent the whole day at our house, and people came and went. And I sold 65 pieces that first trunk show.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't doubt it, because your work is really spectacular, but holy mackerel.
Yeah, that was my aha moment. And then my friend hits me. She goes, "See, I told you." And I was like, oh my God, it was like the most amazing day ever. And it gave me confidence that actually people liked my work. But with all our insecurities, in the back of my mind is, they just all came because they're my friends and they were buying my jewelry just to make me feel good. It's kind of what I was thinking about. But anyways, after that, I think when I decided, I applied for New York Now shortly after that. And this is in 2009, or shortly after, when the market crashed, right?
Wow, yes.
I was like, I'll just apply to New York Now for the handmade section. Everyone tells me that it's a 3 to 4 year wait to get in. And I applied, and I got in. And so that was the beginning of my wholesale business.
So pause for a second, sorry. And just for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, just give a picture of what New York Now is so that they understand kind of what you applied to.
Yeah, New York Now is, I forget. Oh, it used to be called New York Gift.
Uh-huh.
And it is the biggest trade show in the country for all gifts, whether it was jewelry, paper, whatever, where all the retailers go to buy their stuff for the year. And they have one particular small section that was called handmade. So there's hundreds of thousands of people that go, or booths, you know, I don't even know how many booths there are, but the show is huge. It fills the convention center in New York City.
Yeah.
The Javits Convention Center, and there's one small section called handmade, and there's, I don't know how many people are there, but I applied to the handmade section and got in, and to actually get accepted was pretty amazing that I even got in, because they only take a certain amount of jewelers, and certain amount of paper people. I mean, they break it down by categories within the handmade section.
Right.
So I just got really lucky that I got in. So yeah. So that was one of the trade shows I did besides the ones in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to put perspective on it for anybody who's not a part of our field, but there's definitely thousands and thousands of vendors at New York Now. And there's probably, I don't know what percentage of that is handmade, but only about 10% of the handmade gets into the handmade section. And the rest of the handmade people are put into the other sections besides stuff that's not handmade. And if you sell handmade, you know that can be kind of a challenge.
Right.
To try to market your work around folks who aren't making it themselves. Yeah, so you dived just right in.
I did. Well, and also to give you a little background, I always forget to talk about this, and I think people think that I just knew so much and jumped in and did it. I did have a background. Before I worked for the pharmaceutical company, I was in the gift and apparel business. So I understood wholesale. So I think that was a big advantage for me, because I understood the stores and how they bought and the whole cycles and what it took to have a line sheet and to create a collection. So that helped me tremendously. If I didn't know any of that, I don't know if I would have jumped in wholesale as quickly, because it takes a while to figure out how to develop all that.
It does. And what's really interesting to me is let me see if I can formulate the question I actually want to ask. Even though you had all that background, what I'm hearing you say is that you still had to struggle through the insecurities part of being a maker. Right? Is that?
Oh, it's totally true. Because when you are developing it yourself, it's so different than working for a company and helping them develop it, because it's objective, right?
Yes.
It's objective when you're doing it for a company and working for a company, selling and creating a collection. When you are doing it yourself, you have all these doubts. Am I creating the right thing? Is anyone even going to like it? And
is it good enough? Am I good enough? Yeah.
It's and I think that's our biggest challenge as creatives and small businesses, is to trust ourselves and to find our own particular voice and stay with it. Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's going to be my quote for you. So I'm writing it down right there. To trust ourselves, to find our voice.
Right?
Yes, totally.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a jewelry designer is, how do I create a collection that is unique to my own vision and is unique to my own style? Because as you know, there's a million jewelers, right? And
I call us the rabbits of the craft world.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. We are the rabbits of the craft world. But there's so many of us, and how do you differentiate yourself from everyone else?
Yeah. No, right. And it is about being kind of true to yourself, true to your voice, true to your style. Mm-hmm. Pushing yourself, I think, to, at least in the model that I have followed and that you have, you know, creating collections was key so that you could really see a body of work of mine as a customer, a client, and understand it, and, you know,
Well, and I think when
get
you
your
know
brand.
that you're successful with that is that you're identifiable without your label. Like your work is so identifiable. I can see somebody wearing it and going, oh, that's Erica's work because it has your signature to it.
Right.
And nobody could ever reproduce your work exactly like you do because your vision and your stamp on it is so unique. And that's what makes you stand out.
I think so, yeah, as a maker. And I do think that that comes from what you said, which is that trusting yourself, finding your voice, and kind of sticking with it. And even though Tavia does this awesome thing where she talks about like you're at a craft show or whatever and you've made something and you take that thing, you know, and you're like tentatively offering it to the world, you know, like just waiting for the world to, like, I think you're afraid the world's gonna slap it out of your hand, right? That's like, you know.
Well, really, because when you create a collection or you create any piece, it's like your heart and soul is in that. And it's, you feel so, I mean, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel so vulnerable when I create something new and I present it at a show and you're like, here it is. And people walk by and you're like, nobody's looking at it. They hate it or whatever, you know, that goes through your head.
Well, you know, so I don't know. I've been in business. I have been selling my work for over 15 years. And I recently started doing something it's very me in my mind, but it is a little bit different, right? Like it's as paths happen, my path is branching off and I'm like at the beginning of figuring out something new, right? And it's really interesting because, you know, all I'm doing is putting things out there online right now, but I put some things out there online and it just wasn't a huge response back, right? And of course you're going like, ooh, 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 what does that mean? And then simultaneously I realized that time and experience do help a lot, because then 15 years of selling my work, Erica steps in and says, hold on a second, Insecure Erica. Like, you know that it takes time for people, you know, so it's this really interesting. So I would also say to anybody who's at any point in their career selling something that they make and feeling that vulnerability, that I don't think it'll ever go away from me, not once, but I do navigate it differently.
Yes.
Now than I did in the beginning.
You totally do. It's not that knee-jerk reaction. Like, you don't put something out and then you're like, oh, it didn't work and it's only been like 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like,
everybody just love it.
Right. You kind of just take a deep breath and give it some more time and then evaluate. I think as we age, patience becomes a stronger skill set.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, even to this day, when I launch a new collection or a new piece, I still get really nervous. Like when I started this whole thing with the Talisman collection, it was a big shift from how I had been doing my business. And it felt I especially felt so vulnerable because I was creating it for me to help me with my struggles and my challenges in my life. And then to put it out there and kind of tie it into my personal life was kind of like a little scary, you know, like how do I navigate this without feeling completely vulnerable?
Absolutely. So that, to me, that is an awesome way for me to kind of segue into talking to you about this last year and a half and how you've been marketing, like, because you did launch this big new collection that is so personal and evocative, and I would love for you to talk to me about how you did that, because I'm going to shut up and I'll let you talk and then I'll ask more questions, but talk a little bit more about how you introduced Talisman into the world.
Yeah, Yeah, it's very interesting because I have a business coach and she kept telling me, and you need to go on Instagram or Facebook Live and do these lives. People can get to know you and what you're about. So my very first time I went on live, I was so nervous. I mean, talk about feeling vulnerable. I mean, I'm sure.
Oh my, it feels like being naked.
Oh, completely. You're like, oh my God, who's going to come on and watch? Nobody really cares. And so that's how I first started marketing it, was taking this giant step of putting myself out there and going on Instagram and Facebook Live talking about this new collection. And I still get nervous doing it. But it's getting a little bit easier a year and a half later. It gets a little bit easier every time I do it. And yeah, so that's how I started marketing it. And the very first couple pieces I did for this talisman collection, I tested it very, very small.
Yes.
And basically, I think I made, like 10 pieces so that if it didn't work, it would be okay. But it was a process, and it was really fun in the very beginning. I really got the audience involved. I'd send out, go on live, and I'd show my different options and had people give me feedback. And it was really fun to do.
So cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It worked for a little bit, but as the collection's grown, it got a little bit too complicated to always ask people's opinions in terms of driving the direction of the design. So now it's more like I'll come up with a design and then get feedback later on instead of involving from the very beginning. So it's fun to have audience feedback and get people engaged and get their feedback and hear what they like or don't like about things. And that's what I really love about having the social media platform is the interaction with customers, because when you do live shows, you actually get to have conversations one-on-one with them. And,
absolutely.
And I miss that because in the last year and a half, we haven't been able to do that. So the best way to do it is through social media and all that. The only thing I don't like about Instagram is, like, you and I can see each other, but I can't see anybody.
See who's watching us. I know.
And that's the thing that I miss. I wish that everybody could be on with us, and then we can all talk together, but that doesn't work. The only way to do is a Zoom, but
that's definitely how I felt too, or I still feel, but one of the overwhelming feelings I had in the beginning of choosing to kind of try to use live and connect with live was, I'm gonna put myself out there because I want to connect. But it's like I have to assume that I'm connecting because I can't see you back, right? And there's so much in life that is even just talking about going to a show and just the subtle ways that people interact and the little things. It's not always like they tell you directly, I like this, I don't like this. You just get to eke it out of interaction, and so, yeah, I think the same, which is that I'm really grateful for social media and the opportunities to be live. And also I too wish that I could see the faces of everybody who's with us. Now, the interesting part is, like, I have met some people who love to watch the lives. I mean, they do feel connected, but they have zero desire to be seen, right?
Yes,
because that's part of it is the comfort of their own home, and they don't have to be in the public, or so it's good in the ways that it offers us.
Right. True. Not everyone wants to be on camera, and yeah, it's so true.
It's so true. Well, and the first, I mean, this is just a dumb aside, and I've probably said it a billion times, but the first couple of times that I went live, I was like, who knew I was so dramatic? I mean, you did, because you've talked to me before, but I had never talked to myself. So the first couple of times I saw that I was like this the whole time I talked, I was like, do I have to do something about that? I remember thinking, like, gosh, and then it was like, nope. This isn't about, it's about me being me, and not as dramatic as it all is, is part of the package. And that's really funny because I just see that somebody says, let's see, I never say people's handles correctly. So this is Writer NYC says, yeah, we have to trust ourselves, right? When we're I mean, I think back to what we were talking about, like trusting yourself in your designs, but also that desire how to market in this last year. It was like having an instinct or having your coach say, yep, that's what you need to do, and going like, okay.
Yeah, it's true. I was like, are you crazy? Why do I need to go online? But it's made a difference, and I feel like I have stronger connection to my community. And even though I can't see anyone, I do get comments. People do write to me and say things about certain content that I bring out. So that makes me feel really good that people find it valuable and they enjoy it.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you get the same thing too, right? With your lives that you've been doing every week. People write to you and tell you they like it or what they find interesting.
That was definitely the part that, you hope, right, that the things that you're doing are having impact. And impact is a lot of different things. Sometimes for us, impact is hands down about selling jewelry, right? And sometimes for us, it is just about communicating and connecting and working knowledge has nothing to do with me as a selling artist, except for that's a lifestyle and a profession that's hard. And I wanted to share and sit down with other people who do it. And yeah, it's been nice to have some people in the background come in and say, thank you so much for this, because I am in this transition in my life, or I'm doing this, or this has been such an isolating experience, and being able to watch you and all these incredible people have these conversations has been, so yeah, I mean, it's been rewarding in ways that I will be processing for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And challenging.
Yeah. And I mean, community is just so important. I've learned that in the last couple of years, how important community is. Because when you have a shared experience, whether it's a good one or a bad one, or you're going through a rough time or a happy time, it's that much better when you have a community to share it with, right? I mean, what better way to, what better way to go through like a celebration than to have a great group of people that you can celebrate with, or have that community who can help you through a tough time.
Absolutely. And I think that for working knowledge, it exists because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it was a direct response to seeing things change fundamentally in my life, literally meaning my business model is that I would do shows. I call it the 6-inch zone. Like as a jeweler, I'm like this, and I'm working, and then I would like look up and walk out into the world to whatever city or place I was going to. And my community was there. That's an amazing model. And I would see all of these people that brought me so much joy, amazing conversations, learning all the things that happen when you interact with your peers and your customers. And when I saw that going away, and I wasn't sure for how long, I was like, oh my gosh, this whole show exists because of what you said, community, and how essential it is to our, I don't know, whatever all that is.
Yeah, our heart and soul. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, I love that you're doing this. I think it's really wonderful.
I appreciate it, and I think that it feels good. It feels like a good thing, and I'm learning a lot. Like I knew that I was gonna learn about people that I care about, and learn more, because being intentional and asking amazing people questions, you're like, oh wait, wow, like I never knew that about you before. But the thing that surprised me the most is, it's like the more philosophical things I learned from people every show, just talking about kind of sort of how they approach things and how they look at things, um, like for 2020, like looking back, I kind of like to look back a little bit and then we'll look forward a little bit. So looking back for you over the last year and a half, was there any like really pivotal moments or like a major lessons learned, something that was really um, a great success, a great failure, or a big shift for you in this last?
You know, I was really, really lucky in the sense that I had been working so hard to transition my business to an online
Oh my.
business. I've been working really hard on it for the past 3 years, and having a successful online business does not happen overnight. It takes a
No.
long time. I mean, when I first started, I had zero traffic to my website.
Yes.
I mean, zero.
Literally
And
zero.
literally zero. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? So it's been a long journey for me. But I must say, like, if you take baby steps and you have a really good strategic plan and stick with it, it does change. And I've seen that happen. And I actually had my best year last year, even though it was the pandemic. And it was due to all the previous hard work I had done. I built an email list. And I did social media, and I did a lot of outreach, trying to develop my community. And they were there for me all during the pandemic, and it was a great way for me to connect with them because I wasn't doing shows. And so it was a really, I felt like it was a really good experience for me. I did, like I said, the lives. I did a couple lives where I went on and showed new collections and had people come on and tell me what they thought and what they liked and what they didn't like. Yeah. I had my mom come on with me a couple times, which is really fun. My mom is very darling. And so she would be my model, and I tried jewelry on with her. And so my community has really gotten to know my mom because she's just so cute. And it's fun to share that experience with her. I don't know if she really enjoyed it as much as I did. I think lots of times she's just like, okay, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. But it was fun.
Because that's as moms what we do too, right?
Right,
You're like, if this is good, my child, if this is going to do what you need it to do, 100%, yes.
Yeah. So.
I would love to kind of sit with you for a second in this idea of kind of the long game for growing our businesses, because I think, and I'm saying this, but it's really a question. It can be so hard to dig in for the long game sometimes, because when you're growing, like when you're 3 years into trying to grow that online business, there's some really bad moments, right?
Oh my God, completely. There were moments that I was like, what am I doing? And I tried all these things and nothing's working. So I think the biggest thing I learned through all of that is you have to try things, and then you have to look at the analytics or whatever you have to measure what you're trying to make sure it's working. And if it's not working, you take a baby step and you try something new. And I used to be one of those that was always looking for the next shiny object. So I try something and I do it for a short time, and I'm like, it's not working. And exactly, I was like, I'm not doing that. And then I try something else, and I'd wait like 2 seconds. I'm like, that doesn't work. And it wasn't entirely true. Things were working, maybe not on the pace that I wanted it to do, and I wasn't measuring it. So I would give up too soon. So you have to measure, you have to look at your data. And as creatives, that's really hard for us, right? Because we're always about the vision and making things, and who wants to look at data? But I've learned that data is really, really important.
Oh my God.
It really guides your decisions if you let it.
It so does. And it's like, and it's not natural. It's not natural for me to look at data or to look at numbers or to look at, it's all about my natural driver is the way it feels to me.
You can do both of those, right?
Right.
That's what I've learned is you can go by what you feel.
Yes.
And then you go and you look at the data and see if your intuition is right. And I bet you 90% of the time you're right.
It is. And, the really interesting thing too that it's like I said, the wisdom and the philosophy is always something that I gain. I mean, what you just said about baby steps and being strategic, I had wanted to build my online business, but always, I call it the rabbit wheel, by the way, instead of the hamster wheel. So anyway, just know that that's what I mean. I was always on the rabbit wheel in terms of just producing work to get to the next show. So the website was always on what I call the list, the list. But I never was doing it. And then 2020 rolled around and there I was like, oh my gosh, it's website time. And so with my wonderful woman, Dana, who helps me with all things tech, we just dove in and started trying to figure out what that looked like for us, right? What online looked like. And that could be a whole series of podcasts, right, on its own, building an online business. So that's not really what I'm trying to dive into. But where I am right now, it's July 1st, right? So we are literally almost about a year and a half into things kind of fundamentally changing, is hitting a little bit of a slump where I'm like wanting to be that dramatic self, where I'm like, none of it's working, like I don't, because that's my sort of natural instinct. But instead, I've been like looking back at metrics and also pausing long enough to realize the growth that you have experienced. And go like, if I look at, esbjewelry.com 2 years ago, I might have had 3 sales in a month. You know what I mean?
And we forget that.
Yeah. And it's really important to kind of, so every time I do something online, a sell or a website update or whatever thing that's happening, I'm learning, like I let myself have the emotional gut reaction, I guess. And then I pause, I look back, I reflect, I look at the numbers, I think about what growth really is and how much growth is really reasonable to accept. If you had 10,000% growth last year, Erica, you're not going to get 10,000% again this year. Right. And so it's really important, as hard as it is, to use metrics and data. And
what you said is so true, is you have to go back and look at your previous data points, because I was doing the same thing like a month ago. I was like, oh, business is terrible. What am I doing? I mean, it wasn't really, but that in my
relative to what your expectation is. Yes.
Yeah. In my brain, I thought that. And then I went back and looked 2 years ago and I was like, oh my God, what am I complaining about? Things are fine. So yeah, I think I know I do this. I set unrealistic expectations for myself.
Totally.
So I need to have that check of going back and saying what's realistic and what's not.
Yeah. And I think that what I've realized is like, I like to be the dreamer that I am, which is the person that sets the unrealistic expectations. So I have to learn to balance allowing myself to be that person, but then being able to nurture her and remind her that we're okay, right? That we didn't meet all those goals or expectations. But
and the world's not going to fall apart if you don't meet those crazy dreams that we have. Because I think that's part of being a creative, is we have, it's the ability to dream, right? And to reach for these big, huge goals. That's what drives us as creatives. That's why we create, so that we can make more stuff. And all that, right? And so you need those goals to be able to do that. But we just have to remind ourselves that it's okay. You can do that. And if you don't reach those points that you want to, doesn't mean you won't ever. It just may not be when you want it to happen.
Yeah. I think it was I wish that I was the type of person that could listen to like a lot of entrepreneurial podcasts and things like that. But I'm not, to be honest. It's not but I've listened to some. And one of the kind of aha moments for me, and the few that I decided to listen to, was these mega, incredibly successful entrepreneurs who talked about the 15 failures before the thing that I see. And, that was such a, like I said, an aha moment for me, that it's all part of it.
And you learn so much. I think you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. And but it's so true. It's like you hear about all these people that supposedly are overnight successes, but they really aren't, because they've been working at things for a long time. And you just hear about their successes at the time that they're really successful. So you think that they only had to do it for, X amount of time, and then they were this huge success. But they've been laying the foundation for so long.
And it's one of the reasons that I love, to go back to what we were saying earlier, our community and the warmth and the honesty in the creative community, because it's really easy to have the grass is greener syndrome, where you are looking at the person across the aisle and they seem busy and you're like, oh my God, I'm not selling anything, and they're selling things. And, but then we have this community that most people are so honest, and they'll be like, either be like, yes, you know what, I did have a great show, or no, that's not what that was. I remember sitting across from a high-end jeweler a couple of years ago, and I was having a decent show. I was busy, and she comes over at some point, and she was wonderful about it. She's a great human being, but she was like, man, it's kind of hard for you to watch. I'm not having a good show. I'm not selling anything, and you're so busy. And I was like, well, a couple things you need to know. One is that I talk a lot. And so I look like I'm really active, but part of that is just me talking. Anyway, we chatted for a while. And then maybe it was later that day, she comes over and she's like, oh my God, I had a sale, blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that her one sale tripled what I made the whole weekend, right? Because that's the difference in the way that things go. And the point is, it's so easy to get grass is always greener syndrome. So I love when we sit and we talk and we have real conversations, and your willingness to just be like, oh my God, yeah, there was some really terrible times, because it's so easy for people to look at you, your work, your website, your marketing efforts, and see that as this manifestation of success, which it is, but it's a hard traveled.
Oh yeah. There were so many days that I was like, oh my God, I think I need to quit. I mean, I'm sure you've thought that too. We've talked about this, at shows. It's like, why am I doing this?
Right. It's when you start being like, Trader Joe's would be a really good place to work.
I could go bag groceries or bring up groceries and probably make more money than I'm
Totally. Everybody seems so happy at Trader Joe's. It's always been my, that's where I'm going. It's Trader Joe's.
It's so true. It's so true. And, it's a good reminder to have this community talking to other jewelers to know that, because I think customers don't understand the struggles that we have as a maker, supply issues, pricing issues, deliverability, and all the things that go on behind the scenes. So it's so nice to have other makers that, I call you and say, Erica, this is happening to me. Have you experienced this? And to have that support, because it can be really lonely when things are really rough. If you don't have that community to call up and say, how do you handle X, Y, Z? Right?
Because it feels like it feels like a singular problem a lot of the time, I think.
Right.
And then
most of the time it's the same stuff, right? That you experience, I experience, and it makes it not such a lonely journey when you can say to somebody, this is what I'm experiencing, and you're like, oh my God, that happened to me too. Right?
Yeah, and this is how, and I got through it, and this is how I did it, and this is, it reminds me of your really good girlfriend who you can say anything to, and she's like, oh yeah, that's happened to me too, and you're like, really? That weird thing happened to your body too? And she's like, yes, honey, you're fine, and you're like, okay,
Right. And that's what we always did at the end of the day when we'd go to dinner, right? During these shows, we'd have these whatever happened. And we're like, did this happen to you? And I'm like, yeah, that happened to me too. And you're like, oh God, it's just so nice to have that way to decompress so that you can get ready for the next day.
Yeah, and that would be probably, and I think it is advice that I have tried to give to people who are entering the creative field, selling your work, is find community, ask questions.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to reach out, and I think you will find that most of us are open and willing and happy.
You do. You find your peeps. You
Yep.
really do. Like, not everyone is going to be your best friend, but you do
Oh,
find
no.
community. And those, like, they're lifelong friends. And it's so fun. I mean, I really miss going to shows and seeing all of you guys. You know, I have such fond memories.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be overly sappy because that is totally the way I do things, but it's like, it's family, it's people that I have had some of my biggest triumphs and some of my darkest moments, and they have held me up in both. And like I said, laughed with me, cried with me, drank too much with me, explored a city, ate all vegan, whatever it was, right? Like whatever the adventure was, we've hit it hard. And when I look back on all those years of doing those wholesale shows, not all of those years were good business years by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, exactly. I totally agree.
But the memories of the experiences and all that I learned, it's from the people that were in my life, it was priceless, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. We had so much fun.
We really did. I think Laura was here. Hold on. I want to scroll back up because I think Laura Cardwell was here.
I think I saw her.
She says, I love you ladies, and being in your full badassery, she said. Yes, we do live in our full badassery. Do you feel like, so you said you were already really driving your online business kind of prior to the pandemic. Do you see just really continuing down that path of really trying to keep it online and really minimizing in person, or what do you see is going to happen with you with in person moving forward?
I'll do a couple. I mean, I love in person just because it's so fun to meet my customers face to face, and from a design perspective too, it's so good to see what it looks like on real life people. Because what looks good on me doesn't look good on you, or it doesn't look good on my mom. Because we all have, like, I have a long neck. My mom has a short neck. She's got a wider face than I do. So all those kinds of things help me as a designer, as an artist, when I put things on people. Like, I have no boobs, so wearing a 20-inch necklace is fine. Whereas somebody who has really big boobs, they're like, some people want it in their boobs, but other people are like, I need something either longer or shorter.
Or shorter, yes.
In the wrong place. So
yes.
All those kinds of things are invaluable. And I love how selling jewelry connects me on a really deep level with my customers. I know that sounds corny, but But it is true, and I have gotten to be really good friends with so many of my customers. I see them at shows, we make a great connection, and then we stay in touch, just like you and me. We have this experience, and we share our lives together, and they know about my family, I know about their family. So I will never give up all my in-person events, because it helps me on so many ways. And it's also because, like what you said, what we do is so isolating. We're in our studio all day, and we're working, and I don't see people. Right? So, when people are saying, oh, how was it during the pandemic? Did you stay home and, hang out in your house? I was like, no, I went to work every day. I got out of my house because nobody was in my studio. So it was just me and my dog and my assistant. And it was perfectly safe for me to go to work. And so my life didn't change from a work perspective much during COVID from that perspective.
From that perspective, yeah.
But going back to your question, am I going to stay focused online? Yes, I will stay focused on online. And wholesale has really become a very small part of my business. It's maybe 15, 20%. And I'll continue doing wholesale, but I don't think I'll go back to like New York Now or the Baltimore show. I'll seek out stores individually, but I won't do a big trade show anymore. I just feel like that's not the way to, it's not the right way for me to do my business anymore.
Right. It's like, even though we're creative folks, there were these paths that were laid out in front of us that you could follow for how to sell your work, how to sell and market your work. And, you know, I'll speak for me. I can't speak for you, but, you know, like I was following those paths. It was like, okay, here's these big trade, you know, handmade trade shows. I'm going to go do that. I'm going to pick up accounts. Not that it was all bad by any means, but yeah, as time has passed and I have evaluated, what did you say? I have reminded myself that I do own a small business that's me, and that one of the many rights and powers that I have is to define what it looks like.
Exactly.
And that's been the big aha for me lately is like, oh, wait a second. Like, I don't actually have to follow those paths. I can do my own. And that's the same. I feel like I can't imagine that I'll ever go do a big trade show again in my life. I will nurture and adore the good relationships that I have built. I will happily let go of the ones that weren't. You know, and that was a big refreshing moment for me this last year. It's like it had been in the build for years, and then something about I guess because my business model kind of fell apart in a sense because I depended on shows and they weren't there. I was kind of like, okay, right, I'm starting over to some degree. That's how it felt a little bit, you know. And
you just had to pivot and figure out what worked for you, right?
Yeah, and really be willing to let go of the things that weren't feeling like they served the goal, which for me is getting to make every day, making a decent living, and enjoy, and you know, and like these are the days. This is my life, right? Like living and enjoying. So anyway, that was a little bit off, but
no, it's so true. So true. I think that's what the pandemic's taught so many people is to value what's important to you, and you really can make those choices on how you want to live your life and who you want to be in your life, right? Yeah. So that's what I learned the most about this is that you can have control over your destiny. You just have to figure out what's important to you. That's the most important thing is figuring out where you want to be and how you want it to be and who you want to be in your life.
Absolutely. It's like the hold ons and the let goes and being able to do both, holding on to certain things and the willingness to let go to certain things. And
I know. I remember when I like going back to the wholesale part, it was really hard for me to let go of doing wholesale because in my brain I was so wired, like, you know, you're talking about changing abuses. I was so wired to the only way I could make a living was to do wholesale. Yeah. But then when I went back and looked at my numbers, when I started looking at my numbers, I was like, if I continue to do this, I'll make like $10,000 a year. And I can't live on that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, I mean, not to get into the weeds too much, but like 2018 was my biggest gross sales year of my career, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I blew past some number of goals I had set for myself. And it was like, and this is dramatic because that's me, but like I almost died too. Like I made so much jewelry. I worked so hard, right? That at the end of the year, it didn't even, I wasn't even sure how I felt about it. And anyway, fast forward to this past year, 2020, I netted almost as much as I netted that year. I didn't sell nearly as because I wasn't doing so much wholesale and I wasn't spending so much money on shows. And it was a huge
eye opener, right?
yeah, huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I learned too. Is when I looked at how much I was spending on all those wholesale shows, because they're not cheap.
No.
I
No.
went, oh my God, why am I doing this?
Well, the whole way that I learned how to remember gross and net was because somebody was like, it's gross that you don't get to keep it, right? Like, that's how I remembered what gross was. And it is, because you're like, oh my gosh, I sold $150,000 worth of jewelry this year. Whoa, that I made. That's mind-boggling.
There's a lot
But
of jewelry.
I didn't keep that much. I didn't keep half of that, right? Or whatever. And so, and look, I don't, I'm not going to talk numbers online. So I just want to be clear that I'm going to use arbitrary numbers. But yeah, I mean, it was huge to do when I was like doing my bookkeeping for the end of 2020. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh,
I brought home.
I'm so glad you were home more, made just as much money, and not killing yourself. Because
Right. I mean, like I said, dramatic, I wasn't almost dying. But, that was the first year that I was like, oh, yeah, there's a capacity to the amount that I can make. Like, my hands are like, no more.
it's so true. It's so true. There's only so much you can do with your hands and your body, and to stay healthy, right? I learned that I was making too much jewelry and not taking care of my body, and my hands were hurting, my elbows were hurting. I couldn't even open jars because I was using my hands too much.
The weak, yeah.
They were really weak. So it's really important to take care of yourself, and you have to protect yourself. So that means, like, how do you make a living without killing yourself?
Yep.
And still keep the joy in it, because the whole reason why I did this was because I love making jewelry.
Because I love it. Mm-hmm.
So that's the biggest thing, is like, how do you do that and continue on?
Yeah. And I think that the really, the great and challenging part is that it's ever evolving. The answer to that question is this living thing. And a lot of times it feels really good to see that living thing and see that it can change and it will change. And then there are times in our lives that's a struggle, because you're like, I just want to know what is ahead of me, But do you have anything that you're really excited about looking forward? Like I said, we kind of looked back. I asked you, did you have any big pivots? Do you have anything really like looking forward that you're excited about or worried about or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a lot of things planned. I have this special group on my website. It's called VIP Club. And so it's a membership club that people can join. Sorry, my phone is slipping.
Oh, you're fine.
So I have a lot of really cool things that I'm designing just for them. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun doing like small exclusive collections for them. So that's what I'm working on. And just evolving how I do business and coming up with some new designs. That's probably my favorite part, probably for you too, is designing something new and finding new ways to do things. So.
New, and sometimes, is this true for you? Is it like sometimes it'll just be this really subtle shift in the way that you make something, or that'll just like open up this whole new...
Isn't it so amazing how just changing one little thing can open up all the possibilities for you? I used to think that I had to change my entire design to come up with something new, and you don't really.
No.
A little tweak.
And sometimes that little tweak is really fundamental in some way, because it'll open up this new, set of possibilities for design. That's why I love to to kind of revisit things. Oh, I have an interesting question for you. I mean, I think it's interesting. Do you archive collections? Have you ever been like, okay, this this talisman, for example, I know they're so new, so it wouldn't be true, but this talisman is no more. I'm done with it. These are the last ones. Do you do things like that with your work?
I do. Well, because I've been in business now, which I can't believe is I've been in business 11 years. So if I kept every little design that I ever made, it would just be overwhelming on the website. So yeah, at some point I do take things off when I see that it's been sitting on the website and nobody's buying it, and it's been, a year or so, and I'll retire it. I think it's important to keep things fresh, but then I also do have some pieces that have been on the website since I started. Like I have this simple wideband Roman ring, I call it, and that's been a staple of my business, and it'll always be on the platform.
Always,
yeah,
100%. I definitely have some work that will always be there.
Yeah, it's the foundation of your brand, right?
Yeah,
that's the foundation. Then I have these stone stacking rings that will always be on the website, because those two rings are what really launched the business. So
yeah,
it's like identifiable to me, so I keep those pieces on.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear kind of what your philosophy is, because I sort of had an epiphany recently that I have a collection that I think it's time. Like it felt just in here like it's time to let that collection go and really be very intentional about archiving it. And it felt good, and I've got to figure out exactly what that looks like to me, and but because I do have some work that still exists in that collection. But anyway, I'm glad that I thought to ask you.
Yeah, and you can always bring it back to later if you decide that you're going to archive it, and then in a couple years you decide like, oh, I kind of miss that. I mean, there's a couple of pieces that I archived. It's my lace collection, and I still get people asking about it. Oh, do you still make that? And sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should bring it back. But so far I've said no. So
right, and there might be a time that you're ready to do that. I see that we have a question. So let's see. Question: with online sales, what do you think about the change in EU tax VAT starting today? I've been reading many people are saying they are having to question shipping to Europe.
I currently don't ship to Europe for for just the complexities of dealing with Europe. And I don't know, I'm a worrier. I don't know if you are, but I'm a worrier. Okay. So when it comes to shipping overseas, like going to Europe and the hassles of all the taxes and the forms that you have to have on it, I just can't do it. So the only country I will ship to is Canada. So so I don't deal with that. But that's a very good question.
It's an excellent question.
Do you ship to Europe?
I do not. I actually had a really interesting situation recently where I got an order that was a U.S. order, but it was a military base in Europe, and it ended up being fine. But I really was like, oh my gosh, I felt out of my gnomes, and yeah, all the kind of customs and things that I don't really understand, and they do end up costing more for the customer or for you if you're not careful. So there's just a lot. But it sounds like, based on the question, that there's some changes that are happening today that, if I'm being totally honest, I'm not privy to.
Yeah,
I don't know what they are. So
about it either. Yeah. I don't. So
yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Mom. That's my mom, by the way. Doesn't tell
Oh, Mom's happier than we are.
I know she is, for sure. One of the questions that I love to ask people is for people to tell me a story. And the reason that I like to ask that question is because I feel like most of the other things that I ask really are about you in business. right? And it may be that the story you choose to tell me is about you in business, but I will always want to give people a chance to just tell me something
Oh,
that's not driven by me. So by any chance, is there a story that you want to tell me?
oh my gosh. I don't know.
And you don't have to come up with
No
a story,
pressure.
but it's just, no, yeah,
No
no pressure. It's just one of the things that I put on the list because I feel like, um, you know, we, like as a maker, that's part of how I identify, like
Story.
I'm a small business owning metalsmith, like it's, and I just don't ever want to, um, box people totally in. So I'm having this conversation about people in their professional life, and I just want to give people a chance. And I have had some of the most amazing stories from people, stories about them bleaching their hair off or setting the bathroom on fire in elementary school, they're just like so much fun and give you some insight. So I will not push you to tell me a story today, but if you think of just an epic and story that you want to share, you can call me.
Okay. I will.
And we'll talk about it. Trying to think if there's anything else. I guess I really just wanted to compliment you on what I had seen you do online. So available, such a good job, in my opinion, telling the story of your work and you. And
Thank you.
And like you said, it is vulnerable, and I guess I know that, and so it was really easy to be like, not really easy, but I really wanted to make sure that I complimented you on what I've seen because I know it's not easy.
Thank you, Erica. That means a lot. That's so nice.
And it's inspirational too. I think for me, when I see other artists and they're putting themselves out there, being live, talking about their work, I'm seeing their face. It helps me understand too how to venture myself into being online and showing my face and sharing my work. And
I think the most important thing about going online that I've learned and going live is that you just have to be yourself. Like you just have to be authentic, and you're gonna probably make mistakes and say stupid stuff in the beginning, but everybody knows that it's hard, and there's always going to be haters out there. You just have to ignore them and just be yourself. That's the most important thing, because you can't go live and try to be a formula or be like how somebody else is.
Sure.
You just have to be yourself.
It's so true.
And be authentic to who your brand is. That's, I've had days where I looked like hell and I still went on. Then my hair's all a mess. I didn't have any makeup on. And I was like, okay, I have to go live and I'm just going to show up because I've been working in the studio and I don't have time to like do my hair. So
Absolutely.
And I think people like to see you as a real person, and good days and bad days, because we all have it. And to have a perfect life is so not realistic. And, when I first started doing social media and looking at Instagram, I used to get really depressed looking at Instagram because everybody had a perfect profile and they had perfect pictures and everything. Their life was perfect. And I almost quit Instagram because of that, because I seriously would get depressed. You know how they talk about these young kids back in the day would look at fashion magazines and they'd get depressed and feel like they were not enough. That's how I felt when I looked at Instagram. And I think now people are realizing that they need to be more authentic. So you do see a lot more real life shots, a lot more true people showing up, not perfect.
Absolutely.
And that makes me feel a lot better and more comfortable being on this platform than
being on the platform. Yeah. I agree. One of my favorite moments, I have a friend who did this really great thing. I mean, this was pretty early, I guess, social media for me. she took this like beautiful picture of her daughters, you know, one of those photos that you're like, oh my gosh, her life is perfect, you know, one of those that evokes that, like, oh my gosh. But then what she did that was so amazing was she then panned the room, which was a disaster, you know, and it was such a gift to see, like, that's a presentation, that's a choice, what I'm showing you, right? That is not my reality every second of every day. This is my, you know, I have always held that moment in my mind.
Right.
Just being reminded that those presentations of perfect are just that. It's a presentation.
Exactly. I mean, because like most of the time my studio looks like a disaster. And my desk, like most of the time I can't find anything on my desk. You can ask my assistant Taylor. She's always like, I'm always saying, where did I put that thing? I put it in a really safe place, but I can't find it. Like, I'll go look for that.
The second I say I'm going to put it in a safe place, hopefully somebody else sees where that was.
Well, now she's made me a box, and it says safe place. So I have to put it in that box.
Yesterday, this is what happens when you find somebody who's good for you. Dana was here yesterday, and she was like, would it be okay if I tidied a little? Well, because we had gotten an inquiry about a necklace, and we were both like, I know you didn't sell that necklace, but we could not find this necklace anywhere, you know? And it was like, what have we done? What is going on with this necklace? And then we even picked up this one tray of jewelry, and it was like, yeah, this is jewelry. Anyway, we talked about this tray of jewelry, but we didn't like really look in it, and we put it aside. And then I'm like, Dana, what are we going to do? Because I don't think we sold it, but it's not here. And you're usually the crisp one, like, and you can't remember, you know. And then finally we figured out what we had done, but that's when she was like, I think I might need to clean up around here. Like, this is insane, Erica.
She's so nice. Taylor doesn't even ask me anymore. She just cleans up. I come in and it's clean. I'm like, oh, I guess it really was a mess.
It was bad, yeah. Well, Ann, I love you so much. I think that I think it's almost 6. Oh, it's after 6. So that means we've been talking an hour and a half. And that's what I told you yesterday. I said we would go like an hour to an hour and a half. So we're pretty perfect. One thing I don't want to forget is, can you tell me the song that you chose for the Working Knowledge playlist?
Oh, it's just it's a band. It was a playlist that I liked.
Awesome.
It's
perfect.
I can't even pronounce it. It's called Caravan or something like that. I sent you
You did. That's why I didn't want to say it out loud, though, because I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
You made me butcher it. I don't even really know how to pronounce it, but I love them. It's great. A really nice vibe to it, and
that's awesome.
I like all the songs on it, so I couldn't even give you one of them. So if you look on Spotify and you put their name in, they'll come up with a whole list of songs. So
that's awesome. Well, and you know, I love music, and it's always been a huge part of my life. And so when I decided to do Working Knowledge, I wanted to add a playlist, because I thought, what better way, to find out what people are listening to,
for sure,
but also to learn new music that I would never stumble upon by myself, you know? I've definitely had a couple people who are like, I don't listen to music when I work. I listen to books, or I listen to podcasts, you know? So I know we all kind of do things differently.
Yeah, I always listen to music. So that's always the $1 million question when we walk in the studio. It's like, okay, what should we listen to today?
Right. Oh, I know. Totally. It's a huge question. For me too, when I get in the studio, it's kind of like, what mood am I in? You know, what mood am I in today? So that's my mom. And she says, just wanted to let you know that your audio has been off today. And I think it's this crackling sound.
Oh, I can hear you fine. I haven't had a problem.
Good. I was wondering, you didn't say anything to me. I have been hearing a little bit of feedback from my side when I speak. So for everybody who's listening, I'm sorry if my audio was really funky today. I'm honestly not sure why. Technology and me are not, you know, I don't know, but I'll try to work on it for next week and see if there's anything I can do about it. And will you tell everybody what, like, the best way to see your work? the easiest way to see your work?
Yeah, I have my own website, and it's chikahisastudio.com. It's CHIKAHISA studio.com. And then I'm on Instagram, obviously, at Chikahisa Studio, as well as on Facebook. Yeah, so that's probably
awesome. And do you by any chance have a live that's scheduled and coming up soon that anybody could know to look for?
Yeah, I usually am on every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that's usually when I'm on.
Fantastic, at 10 a.m. So, okay. And I'm trying to think, normally I do announcements. What's happening here? So for me, I have on July 11th, which is my 44th birthday.
You're so young.
I am doing I'm doing a show in person here in Asheville called The Big Crafty, so I'm excited about that. And then the week after that, I'll be doing a virtual show with the crafter in the Southern Highlands. So for me right now, that's what's going on. And next week on Working Knowledge, I'm going to be interviewing 2 people at the same time.
Wow.
Yes. Which will be a first for me. And I'm going to be interviewing the marketing director of an art guild and the president of that art guild. So just kind of an interesting perspective on kind of our world and some of the ways that we sell and do. So, Anne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It was so fun hanging out with you.
I know, I can't wait till I get to see you again in person, though, and we get to go eat dinner and talk for 4 or 5 hours.
I know. I missed that. So
Hopefully
soon.
Hopefully soon. I did want to tell you before I forget that a customer of mine named Anne reached out to me on Facebook when she saw that I was going to be interviewing you, and she had really, really wonderful things to say about you. And so anyway, you're a good one, Anne Chikahisa. Thanks so much.
So are you, Erica. So anyway.
Have a great weekend, and
thank you so much. It was so fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody who joined us, and I'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.